If you look to the rulers of the modern ocean, you see sharks. The great white, the tiger shark, the hammerhead. They are the symbols of predatory perfection, timeless tyrants that have patrolled the seas for ages. We think of their dynasty as an unbroken line stretching back to the dawn of the dinosaurs and beyond. But this perception is an illusion, a ghost story told by the fossil record. The truth is that for a vast, forgotten stretch of time, the oceans were ruled by imposters. They were bizarre creatures that wore the silhouette of a shark, moved like a shark, and killed like a shark, but were something else entirely. Their time on Earth was an explosion of evolutionary creativity, a grand, terrifying, and ultimately doomed experiment. This is the story of nature's greatest failure and the true forgotten age of monsters. To find this lost world, we must travel back not just past the dinosaurs, but deep into the Paleozoic era, to a time known as the Carboniferous period. From roughly 358 to 298 million years ago, the planet was an alien landscape. On land, a revolution was underway. Vast, humid swamps, choked with colossal tree ferns and towering scale trees, stretched across the new supercontinent of Pangaea. In the air, a high oxygen atmosphere fueled the reign of giants, dragonflies with the wingspans of eagles and millipedes the length of crocodiles. It was a world of terrestrial titans. But the real spectacle, the true heart of this bizarre age, was in the water. Back then, the world's oceans were fundamentally different. With most of the landmass fused into one colossal continent, the planet was dominated by a single, immense body of water, the Paleontologic Ocean. It was a super ocean, a contiguous sea that covered more than half the globe. Its sheer scale is difficult to comprehend. A modern jetliner would need to fly for over 24 hours straight just to cross its breadth. This endless expanse of water, along with the semi-enclosed Paleotethous Sea, created an unprecedented arena for life to evolve. And evolve it did. The oceans of the Carboniferous were a gallery of horrors, a biological laboratory where nature's imagination ran wild. At the center of this world was a creature known as Adestus, the scissor-toothed shark. Growing to over 6.5 meters or 22 feet, it was as large as the biggest great whites of today. But its killing apparatus defied all modern comparison. Instead of rows of replaceable teeth, Adestus possessed two single, curved blades of serrated bone, one on the upper jaw and one on the lower. When it struck, its mouth closed with the mechanical, brutal efficiency of a pair of flesh-shearing scissors, snapping shut with 3 times the force of a wolf's bite. Any prey caught in this vice would have been bisected in a single, gruesome motion. Yet, as terrifying as it was, Adestus was not alone. It was merely one star in a whole constellation of experimental predators belonging to an order called the Eugeneodontida. This group was defined by its fantastic dental innovations. Where Adestus had scissors, its close relatives had saws. Perhaps the most famous is Helicoprion, a later Permian descendant whose lower jaw was a perfect spiral of teeth, a living buzzsaw. During the Carboniferous, its ancestors prowled the seas. Genera like Agassizodus and Toxoprion followed the same blueprint, trading scissor blades for circular saws built of bone and enamel. These tooth whorls, a recurring theme in this ancient ocean, were not just for show. Recent analysis suggests they were devastatingly effective, allowing these creatures to rip through shoals of fish, dismember soft-bodied prey, and even serve as can openers for the shelled ammonites that filled the seas. These bizarre dental contraptions were a spectacular success. The Eugeneodonts quickly became the dominant hunters in nearly every marine environment, from the sunlit shallow reefs to the dark abyssal plains. But their strangest member, the undisputed king of the Carboniferous seas, was a creature that dwarfed them all. The behemoth known as Campaloprion. Based on the size of its teeth, paleontologists estimate it reached lengths of 9 meters or 30 feet. It was the largest animal known to have ever lived up to that point in Earth's history. A creature of immense size and power, patrolling an ocean that already felt like a fever dream. The Carboniferous seas were a Jaws extravaganza, a Sharkapalooza of truly epic proportions. So, where did they all come from? The answer lies in the catastrophe that preceded them. Just before the Carboniferous began, the world was shaken by the late Devonian mass extinction, the second of the planet's big five die-offs. The seas were devastated. The undisputed rulers of the Devonian, the giant armored placoderms like Dunkleosteus, were wiped out completely. Their iron-clad reign was over. A power vacuum of unimaginable scale opened up in the world's oceans. Into this void swam the cartilaginous fishes. These so-called sharks were not new. Their lineage was already ancient, having originated some 90 million years earlier. But they had always lived in the shadows of the placoderms, never quite making it to the top. The Devonian extinction changed everything. It was their lottery ticket. With the apex predator niches wide open, they diversified with explosive speed. The number of families ballooned by over 350% in a geological blink of an eye. In this new world, they were not just survivors, they were conquerors. And they didn't just reclaim old niches, they invented new ones. In the shallow seas and coastal waters, a new kind of hunter emerged, the Catenicanthiforms, the cactus sharks. Their bodies were a classic shark shape, but their dorsal fins were armed with massive, ornate spines. Some were barbed, others were thorny, all were clearly defensive. These were not weapons for hunting, but deterrents against being hunted, likely by their own larger, more aggressive relatives. They were ambush predators, much like the bull sharks of today, with mouths filled not with cutting blades but with rows upon rows of multi-cusped teeth designed to grip and hold, allowing them to swallow their prey whole. Among them were true giants. The monstrous Civetus could reach 7 meters, or 23 feet in length, a deep-water leviathan whose existence proves that gigantism was a recurring theme in this predatory paradise. Even more perplexing were the Stethacanthids. These were the anvil sharks. If you were to swim beside a Stethacanthes, you'd be forgiven for thinking you were hallucinating. Its first dorsal fin was not a fin at all, but a flattened, anvil-shaped platform, covered in a patch of rough, spike-like denticles. As if that wasn't strange enough, the top of its head was covered in a matching patch of spines. What was the purpose of this absurd structure? It almost certainly created a massive amount of drag, making Stethacanthes a slow, cumbersome bottom dweller. The leading theory is that it was used exclusively by males for mating displays. A costly, flamboyant signal to attract females, proving the owner was strong enough to survive despite such a ridiculous handicap. To make matters even slower, strange, whip-like filaments trailed from their pectoral fins, adding yet another layer of bizarre drag. Yet, against all odds, this design worked. Stethacanthes and its relatives survived for 50 million years, their fossils found across the globe, and no corner of the world was safe. This dynasty wasn't just content with conquering the oceans, they launched an invasion of the land. For the first time in history, shark-like predators began to infiltrate freshwater rivers and swamps, turning every body of water on Pangaea into a potential death trap. The most successful of these invaders were the xenocants. With their long, eel-like bodies, they undulated through the murky waters of the great coal forests. Some, like the tiny Triadus, were armed with a formidable weapon, a long, sharp spine jutting from the back of their skull like a unicorn's horn, a spine that some researchers speculate may have been venomous. But the true terrors of the Carboniferous rivers were the larger xenocants. Labachacanthes was an apex predator, reaching over 11 feet in length, with teeth accessorized with terrifying tines for impaling its victims. And then there was Orthocanthes, a 10-foot monster whose fossilized remains have offered a chilling glimpse into its behavior. The stomach cavities of adult Orthocanthes are frequently found filled with the remains of smaller juvenile Orthocanthes. It was a serial cannibal. In a world teeming with predators, one of the greatest dangers was its own kind. Amidst all this carnage, there was one gentle giant, Barbclabornia, a massive 15-foot xenocanth from North America. But despite its terrifying size, it was a filter feeder, its teeth too small for hunting. Its existence proves a critical point about this era. No matter what you were or where you swam, there was a shark specifically designed for you. It truly was their golden age, a time of unparalleled diversity, size, and ecological dominance. And yet, here lies the great plot twist of this entire saga. A paleontological deception that has confused scientists for over a century. None of these creatures, not the scissor-toothed Adestus, not the anvil-finned Stethecanthus, not the cannibalistic Orthocanthus, were actually sharks. They were all part of a spectacular and ultimately doomed evolutionary mirage. To understand this twist, we have to look at the very foundations of the cartilaginous fish family tree. All of these animals belong to a class called Chondrichthyes, but shortly after its origin, this class split into two great lineages. The first is the Elasmobranchi. This is the branch that contains all the true sharks we know today, from the great white to the whale shark, as well as all rays and skates. Their story is one of conservative, long-term success. The other branch is the Holocephali. This was the experimental branch, the lineage of wild ideas and bizarre forms. Today, this entire, once mighty dynasty is represented by just one small, quiet group. The chimeras, or ghost sharks, shy inhabitants of the deep sea. But back in the Paleozoic, their family was a gallery of monsters. Adestus, Stethecanthus, Orthocanthus, and all their kin. They were holocephalans, or their close evolutionary cousins, nature's first draft of a top ocean predator. What we call the golden age of sharks was in reality a phantom. It was the age of the ghost shark's monstrous ancestors. They were nature's doppelgangers, creatures that converged on a shark-like body plan but came from a completely different branch of the family. The real sharks, the Elasmobranchs, were there during the Carboniferous, but they were the supporting cast. They were the background players sticking to a successful but less flashy design, while their holocephalan cousins took center stage with their buzzsaws, anvils, and unicorn horns. They were playing the long game, and like so many of nature's most daring and radical experiments, this one was destined to fail spectacularly. The very traits that defined their success, their incredible hyper-specialization, would become the anchors that dragged them into oblivion. Their long, dominant reign began to crack at the end of the Carboniferous period, with a global climate catastrophe known as the Carboniferous rainforest collapse. A sudden shift to a cooler, drier world put immense stress on all ecosystems, and the intricate food webs that supported these specialized predators began to fray. The warning signs were there, but the real apocalypse was yet to come. Roughly 252 million years ago, the boundary between the Permian and Triassic periods was marked by the most devastating extinction event in our planet's history. It is known as the Great Dying, and it was a moment when life on Earth nearly came to an end. Massive, prolonged volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia ripped the planet apart. An ocean of lava poured across the land, while trillions of tons of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide were pumped into the atmosphere. The world warmed catastrophically, the oceans became acidic and were starved of oxygen, turning vast swaths of the seas into toxic dead zones. Over 90% of all marine species vanished. For the hyper-specialized rulers of the Carboniferous, this was a catastrophe from which there was no escape. How does a creature with a jaw built like a pair of scissors hunt when its prey has all but disappeared? What use is a giant, cumbersome mating display on your back when the ocean is a suffocating, acidic hellscape? Their evolutionary creativity had painted them into a corner. When the world they were so perfectly adapted to was destroyed, they had no alternative. They could not adapt. They simply vanished. The scissor jaws, the buzzsaws, the anvil fins, and the freshwater cannibals, their entire spectacular dynasty was erased from the book of life. So, who inherited the empty, ravaged oceans? Who was left to pick up the pieces? It was the true sharks, the Elasmobranchs. While their flamboyant cousins were engaged in an arms race of bizarre weaponry, the true sharks had remained in the evolutionary wings. Their simple, streamlined bodies and versatile, multi-road dentition were not as spectacular, but they were infinitely more adaptable. Their lack of extreme specialization was their ultimate salvation. They weathered the storm. The fall of the great Carboniferous imposters was not the end of the age of sharks, it was the true beginning. Their extinction created a profound evolutionary void, a second chance that the ancestors of modern sharks would spend the next 100 million years seizing. The Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs, was not their first golden age, but their second, and this time, their dynasty would last. They rose from the ashes, diversifying to fill the niches once occupied by their extinct experimental relatives. The story of the Carboniferous is a powerful, humbling lesson in the chaotic and unpredictable nature of evolution. It is not a straight line of progress, but a branching tree of wild trials and often catastrophic errors. The creatures that dominated those ancient seas were one of nature's most spectacular designs, a testament to what is possible when life is given an empty canvas. They were a dynasty of monsters, a failed experiment on a planetary scale, and their fall was necessary to clear the stage for the true rulers of the ocean we know today.